Dusty Baker's future in Washington seemed secure, until it didn't. Chicago: Dusty Baker is not involved in the National League Championship Series, not directly at least. But his name is here, on the warning track and around the batting cages in the hours when the Chicago Cubs and Los Angeles Dodgers warm up. Tuesday night is Game 3 at Wrigley Field. Wonder what I'll hear about the manager of the Washington Nationals, or is that former manager of the Washington Nationals? Before first pitch. Because to this point, in the days after the Nats' traumatic loss to the Cubs in the 5th game of their division series, I've heard it both ways. It's not his fault. You have to bring him back. He can't get over the hump. You have to choose someone else. This wasn't supposed to turn out this way. In the middle of the season, the Nationals and Baker had worked toward an extension of his original 2-year deal, 2 years that resulted in 2 division titles. But Baker expressed some frustration about not having the deal done to the Post's Chelsea Janes, and that story displeased the ownership group of the Lerner family, and negotiations sputtered. But in the week leading up to the series with the Cubs, people with knowledge of Baker's future said a deal would get done, and that it didn't depend on whether the Nats advanced to the NLCS for the first time in franchise history. The club wanted Baker back, so Baker would be back. The 5 biggest questions facing the Nationals this offseason. That may still be the case. But the 5 games that transpired since didn't exactly help Baker's cause. He had Sammy Solis on the mound in a key spot in Game 3. He never once changed his starting position player even though the lineup entered the 5th and decisive game hitting a collective .130. He was part of a bungled communications process in delivering the message to the public as to why co-ace Steven Strasburg would not start Game 4, circumstances that later changed. And in the 5th game, he allowed slumping catcher Matt Wieters to hit with the bases loaded, while top right-handed pinch hitter Howie Kendrick never appeared in the game. None of these are fireable offenses, really. But Baker's contract is up, so it isn't really about firing him. It's about bringing him back. There are so many arguments that, at 68, he deserves a new deal, and I've made them before. Before Baker arrived, the Nats ship was listing under the captaincy of Matt Williams. Baker had proven before he arrived in Washington, and reinforced over the past 2 seasons, that he knows how to navigate the waters of a 162-game season as well as anyone. His players play for him. He keeps them rested and ready. He communicates. They respond. Plus, at some point, wouldn't the Nats want some consistency in the dugout? Since the team arrived in D.C. in 2005, no manager has remained in place for 3 full seasons. Frank Robinson was let go at the end of 2006, Manny Acta was fired in the middle of 2009, Jim Riggleman quit in the middle of 2011, they didn't bring back Davey Johnson after 2013, and Williams was fired after 2015. Baker is the 6th manager in the 13 seasons since the Nats arrived. Excluding interim skippers who finished out a season, only Miami has had more during that span, though Seattle also has had 6. Miami and Washington, those franchises are fundamentally different. The Marlins have had 2 winning seasons and never reached the postseason during that span. The Nats are coming off their 4th division title in 6 years, and are poised to extend that streak in 2018, whoever's in the dugout. But it's also hard to ignore the growing narrative about Baker in the postseason. Wrapped inside the ridiculousness of Thursday's 9-8 loss to the Cubs is the fact that Baker's teams now have lost their past 10 games in which they have had a chance to wrap up a series. Baker has managed 3,532 games in the regular season and the playoffs. So is 10 a small sample size? Maybe. The people who argue that Baker should be gone would tell you it's the sample that matters. So what happens? Let's read some tea leaves. Do the Nationals need to upgrade behind the plate? We know that the Nationals have never paid top dollar for their manager. And while it's something of a tired storyline because Baker has those 2 division titles in his pocket, We're forced to remember that the learners will take a hard line on negotiating with a candidate because of what happened in the fall of 2015. Then, the Nats intended to hire Bud Black. Black found the club's initial offer insulting. Negotiations broke down, and Baker was back in the picture. Late in this season, it would have seemed like Baker would have the upper hand in negotiations. Pittsburgh extended its manager, Clint Hurdle, for 4 years. Minnesota extended its manager, Paul Molitor, for 3 seasons. It would seem as if the price for Baker would go up. But what if the Nats came back to Baker and offered him 2 more years, but at the same $2 million salary he earned in his first 2? Would Baker consider that an insult after 2 division titles? Almost certainly. Yet where would he have to turn? This is supposed to be his last job. Would he rather go pitch himself to the Mets, Tigers, Red Sox or Phillies than return to the same dugout in the district, knowing he has yet another chance to win? And where would the Nationals turn if they can't, or choose not to, work out a deal with Baker? Well, for a franchise that has won division titles under 3 different men, maybe it doesn't seem like it matters much. The sting from the loss to the Cubs has not yet worn off. Yet general manager Mike Rizzo prides himself on moving forward quickly. This week, moving forward either involves Baker, or it does not. Ask around, and you'll find people who are absolutely certain one or the other is the right answer. Read more on the Nationals. Boswell, in the cold gray of the day after, Nats' shortcomings are all too clear. Cubs-Nationals Game 5, one of the craziest games I've ever been a part of. DC Sports Blog, Washington Sports Misery.